Welcome to JLive. I'm Laura Mandel, JArts Executive Director, and it's great to be with you for JLive, the JArts virtual event series where we bring you bite-sized conversations about Jewish life and art with the best artists with Boston connections. Today, I'm with writer Judy Bolton-Fasman, and I have to admit, it's so much fun to be on this side of things because usually she's asking me questions for Jewish Boston articles. So welcome, Judy.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so delighted to be here, Laura. You and I have interacted for as long as I've been with Jewish Boston, which is 5.5 years, and it's really fun to switch roles momentarily for this conversation. So thank you.
Absolutely. And of course, before we say anything else, I just want to remind everyone out there, if you have any questions while we're talking, please put them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we will answer as many of them as time allows. So, Judy, before I say anything else, I also just want to say Mazel Tov. It's been a big week for you because just last week you launched your first book, Asylum. And while I've said this is not a book talk just about Asylum, I want to start by talking about the book a little. Would you read us a piece that you think encapsulates why you wrote this book?
I think I'm going to start with the prologue, read
Great.
just a page of prologue, the first part of it. It's intriguing and it sort of sets the mood for the book. So the prologue is called Burn This. There is a Jewish saying that an uninterpreted dream is like an unopened letter from God, a letter that surely must contain secrets of the universe. The only letters I received that muggy summer when I stayed on the non-air-conditioned side of the 92nd Street Y were from my father, usually cheery cards, well, hello over there, or thin sheets of yellow legal pad paper with bits of curmudgeonly wisdom designed to steer my focus away from my recent heartbreak. You're a smart kid. You can do this. You can finish that darn thesis. Don't let all that time and money be for naught. This time was different. In my mail was an unusually thick envelope that bore the return address of my father's Hartford office. I knew he had more on his mind than usual that summer, and the heavily taped envelope with too much postage signaled as much. It came on the heels of another letter he had sent, his more typical one-page kind, telling me, I shall no longer pay the reservation fee at your school. During the summer of 1985, I commuted on the Madison Avenue bus to the computer lab at Columbia, where I struggled to finish a collection of short stories for my MFA. It was also the summer my heart shattered into a million jagged pieces when my boyfriend vanished, as if our 8 years together had never happened. My loneliness, or as my father put it, lonesomeness, not only saddened him, it magnified his own feelings of aloneness in the world. My father was not one for phone calls. After the initial "how are yous," he was all breathing and silence, so he had taken to writing me a couple of times a week. His postscript was always the same. Write to me at the office. I don't want your mother to know that we're corresponding. We both knew my mother would be wildly suspicious were she not included in our correspondence. While my father was a reluctant talker under the best of circumstances, he was a formal old-fashioned writer who used words like shan't and cheers and salutations. He always signed his cards and notes to me, your father. Love was not in his vocabulary. Did he love me? I knew he worried about me. I was the sensitive firstborn daughter who was the frequent target of her mother's hair-trigger moods. His worry was love, but I sensed this latest correspondence, massive as it was, would reflect that he was older, more tired, and showing more overt signs of his Parkinson's disease. He had already grumbled that my mother was getting more difficult to tolerate, finally defeating him with her relative youth. She was 17 years younger, and with her epic tantrums and fiercely won economic independence. This time I was sure he would dispense with his bon ami, his homespun wisdom, his greetings and salutations, and finally tell me all that I had been yearning to know since my earliest days.
Well, and I can say, Judy, even when I just read that, you totally drew me into the rest of the book. You've said so much in so few words. It's beautiful. And what I find interesting is this book is clearly so deeply personal, which to me is actually a really stark contrast to what you write for Jewish Boston, which is about everything else. So tell us a little bit about what was it like writing something so personal?
Well, I had a lot of fits and starts with it. It took me from start to finish. I started in 2004, threw away everything I had written in 2004 to 2008, and started again when I
Wow.
started researching my dad. And so I would say I worked on the book really 12 years, on this version of the book, 12 years. And there were a lot of drafts. It was a very drafty process. Um,
Wow.
I committed to writing a memoir. I'm a personal essayist. So that's my thing. I make art out of my life. So I'm not uncomfortable with sharing things about my life as long as I do them respectfully and artfully.
Absolutely. I think that's the secret to great art. And I just want to put a plug out there, of course, that everybody should go ahead and buy the book right now because, like I said, it is really captivating and beautifully written.
Thank you.
So, okay, so to move us away from the book a little bit, because I will also note that on October 13th, Judy's going to be doing a book talk with the Vilna Shul, amongst other stops on her tour. So I hope everyone will join in for those as well. But shifting a little bit, I am kind of blown away that in your research about thinking about what you've written for Jewish Boston over the past few years, we had this Basharic fate moment where you realized you've
Mm.
written 617 pieces for Jewish Boston. It's just amazing to me that you've written that many pieces since we met. So tell us a little bit about that experience. What has that been like for you?
You know, Writing for Jewish Boston has kept my writing muscle healthy. I write on a deadline. I write about various topics. In fact, I write about new topics every week, which I like very much because it sort of satisfies my curiosity, my Judy Bolton girl detective persona that I mention in the book. So it's been a wonderful experience. I've met artists, writers, thinkers. Um, I've written about social justice issues. I've run the gamut. I'm the arts and culture writer, but it's really an expansive title, and, I'm lucky enough to work for someone. Here, I'll give a shout out to her, for Kali Foxman, who's been an incredible um, editor and support, and she's really given me a lot of latitude, and she's let me be creative with the job, and that means everything to me. And some people are like, well, it's not my real writing. My real writing is different than my day job writing. um, yes and no. I mean, I feel like this job, I do an occasional column called And Then, where I sort
Mhm.
of riff on social justice issues or current events. And there's been a lot of latitude, and it exercises my creative writing muscle as much as anything. So I'm really grateful for it. And I love working for Jewish Boston. And as you said, I've written 617 articles and counting. And I have to say, not, everyone I've interviewed has been so lovely, so forthcoming, so generous. It's been a great experience.
And I just have to say, on behalf of J Arts and Jewish Boston, we are so lucky to have you because I don't know of many people who have not only the skill to do the writing, but the interest in so many different topics. And just the way you dig into each, I think, is so special. So we're very lucky to have you. So
Thank you.
tell us a little bit more about your writing process, because with this array of things you're writing about, whether it's for your normal arts and culture column, whether it's for And Then, how do you come up with the concepts for what you want to write about? How do you prepare? Like, what does that look like for you?
Well, the writing process for Jewish Boston is very loose in that I read a lot. I read two papers a day. I scroll through Facebook, through Instagram, through Twitter. I read The New Yorker. I read The Atlantic. I read like a variety of things, and of course I read the Jewish press voraciously. So things come up. Things go off. Light bulbs go off in my head about what I want to do. And then again, just to bring it close to home, I get things from J Arts Live, and I want to interview artists and musicians that you have coming up. So there's a lot out there, and it just is a matter of, it's almost like Field of Dreams. Like if you build it, they will come. If your radar's up, things come to you. If your radar is up, things will inevitably click for you. So my radar is always up, and it's a very natural state of being for me. I love it, and it satisfies my innate curiosity, of which is a lot.
Judy, you would be incredible at improv comedy with this idea of like the yes and, because I feel like you are just so positive in your writing and how you think about it. There's always a yes. I love that.
Well, I think there is a yes, because there are a couple of reasons for that. I have an incredible work environment, and I work with an incredible team. And the other yes component to that is, um, I love interviewing people, because as I said, and I'm really not exaggerating, not one person has ever disappointed me. I've always learned something from any article that I've written. So I'm lucky. I know I'm lucky. I know I'm the luckiest writer, in Boston, if not the planet.
We'll take it. Okay, so something I love that you and I share in common is Shtisel. And I love that you said, just call me Shtisel. I think this is like totally your legacy. I think this is the greatest thing. Tell us a little bit about Shtisel and some of the interesting experiences you've had related.
Well, I'll tell you, anytime we write about Shtisel, we get thousands and thousands of clicks. I mean, it is so wildly popular. I think I told Kali that I want to change my name to Shtisel. You know how like Madonna is just Madonna and Cher is just Cher? I want to be Shtisel, because I know that that will come up in the search engine, and it will be optimized, and we will get hits. Um, I love this series, like most of you out there do. And I even wrote about Stishel's ghost artist.
Which I have to say was one of, I mean, I always read your pieces, but that was one of the most fascinating you've ever written because I knew nothing about it and I was so taken by it. So sorry, continue. Tell us more about
No,
it.
I will. No, thank you. No, it was he was the nicest guy, and he's so talented. And I had no, I never thought that there was a ghost artist, but I mean, the art has to come from somewhere, right? So he is he is an Israeli who came to Israel from Russia when he was 12. He graduated from Israel's, I know I'm going to say it wrong, Bezalel Academy. That
Bezalel, yep.
Yeah, that's the
Yep.
finest, art school in the state of Israel, if not, among the finest in the world. And, he's just mega talented. I mean, his paintings, the painting of, I'm forgetting her name, of Stissel's dead wife, is just, it's stunning.
Yep.
The boy with the holding the goldfish in a plastic bag full of water is just gorgeous. So he went through his whole process with me, and part of it was collaborating with his producer, like his producer would say, like the boy with the goldfish um, painting was inspired by Manet. His producer loved Manet and loved that idea, and Alex Tubin, Alex is his name, just went with it, and we got so much attention for that piece, and I was delighted because he's absolutely lovely and generous, and he talked to me for over an hour about his process, which was really really fun. So yeah, Shtisel, we're always trying to think of ways to bring Shtisel to the site, because people love it, and it generates a lot of viewers.
And we all love Stissel.
Mhm.
Okay, so I want to shift gears a little bit. So if anybody reads the book or has read the book, they will know that you are not fully Sephardic, but you are a quarter Sephardic, I believe.
Half.
And I'm half,
I-
excuse me.
I'm half Sephardic. Yeah, my mother's Sephardic, fully Sephardic. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the Sephardic influence in your life and traditions that are, or traditions are part of being Sephardic that feel important to you.
It's interesting. I think the most influence that my Sephardic heritage has had is in terms of language. I'm really interested in language. I grew up with a second language, Spanish, and I don't speak it, and I sort of understand it because it sort of sounds like Spanish. I grew up hearing Ladino. It was sort of like a secret language among my mother, my aunt, and my grandmother. So I think my Sephardic heritage has really given me an appreciation for language and multiculturalism. Because in Cuba, the Sephardic Jews were a minority within a minority. Um, the Ashkenazi population was much larger, and they were very separate populations. So I think language. I think about Ladino, how they've been carrying that. My ancestors have been carrying that language since 15th century Spain. I mean, it's really the baggage of their old country, and they just carry it almost like they carry a valise. They just still speak it. And I think, my theory is one of the reasons they landed in Cuba was because it was so much easier. They came to Cuba. My grandfather was Turkish, my grandmother was Greek, both fully Sephardic. They came to Cuba because my theory is because they could easily adapt to the language. They already knew Ladino, and it wasn't that big a leap to speak modern Spanish.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, within your Sephardic background, one thing that intrigues me that you write a little bit about in the book is this tradition of visiting mediums, which you mentioned. It really feels like a Sephardic thing. And you started to tell me a little bit about an experience of going to a medium with your mom. And I've been thinking a lot about mediums in this time of Yom Kippur and high holidays, especially. And I know this is a thing where you and I resonate. So, tell us a little bit about this story of visiting a medium with your mom.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked me that question because, I have like this little secret thing about mediums. And the medium that I went to visit with my mom, her name was Margarita. She was a friend of my mom's. And I was, healing from a broken heart. And we went to see, what was up with that. And Margarita had a lot of pyrotechnics up her sleeve. She, at one point, smoked the lit end of a cigar, and smoke came out of her ears. I don't know how she did that trick, but she did do that trick. She read cards. She, of course, read tarot cards. She predicted that I would meet a man with blonde hair and blue eyes, which my boyfriend at the time did not have. He was dark and he had brown eyes, and he would have three letters in his name. Well, I've told this story to my husband, who is a scientist and completely skeptical, but my husband was a blonde. Now he's sort of gray, but he was a blonde. He has blue eyes, and his name is Ken. He has three letters in his name. And at the end of everything that we went through with Margarita, she predicted that yes, he was cheating on me. He was at the beach with another woman, and that actually turned out to be true. At the end of it all, she wanted me to, and I can't remember the saint's name, to pray to a saint. Well, that was too much for my mother. My mother was totally along for the ride until I was asked to pray to a saint. And my mother looked at her and said, Margarita, somos judíos. We're Jewish. We can't do that. And so Margarita said, okay, then take a bath in rose water and honey to make yourself appealing. And because she was a friend of my mother, she didn't want to take any payment. The only thing she wanted, she lived in an apartment building above a drugstore, was a couple of liters of, I think it was Sprite, and a couple of packages of Oscar Mayer pimento loaf.
Pimento loaf. There's some payment.
That's a pay. I remember that. I remember the pimento loaf very well.
That's a great story. Thank you. Okay, so it's hard to believe we are already close to time, but this is something I really want to ask you about because I think you're such a role model that you just released your first book. And as you said, you're 60. So tell us a little bit about the experience of releasing your first book at 60 and what has that been like for you? And what does that, what do you want to share with us about that?
Well, I want to share, of course, the positive aspects of that. I think there's a reason why I was 60. I've had a lot of I don't want to say false starts because they were all important to my growth as a writer and as a person. But I've written a lot of things that sit in, in a desk drawer metaphorically. Um, Asylum is probably not my first book technically. I mean, I did a collection of short stories for my MFA. I've attempted novels. I've attempted all sorts of things. But this was the one that I worked on most consistently. But I did it as my children were young at the time. I started when my kids were really young at the time. So it's a very like mom sort of timeline, if you will. And I think you asked me a little bit before about my writing process. What has really what really had helped me was that I always took notes. Notes on envelopes, notes on napkins. Now I've discovered the Notes app on my phone, which I absolutely love. And they have, earlier they blossomed into chapters, or now they kind of find their way into being, a personal essay. So as haphazard as my writing process may seem, I think the women in our audience will totally relate to that. So my I want to leave people with the sense that you're never too late to make art and to keep dreaming, because your dreams are what fuels your art and what fuels your soul, and there's no expiration and there's no age limit.
I also love that the other day you even said, even if you're just making notes, anytime you're writing something down, anytime you're doing part of a process, that's creating art. And I got to tell you, that really stuck with me, Judy, because I was thinking about how often I have ambition to make art or to write and I don't quite get there. But you really said it beautifully, which is just do something. And every day, if you've created something, it builds towards something.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't, note taking and just writing down impressions in the moment are really integral to my process, and I suspect they're integral to a lot of people's process. I have to say that doing that sort of takes the performance anxiety out of sitting in front of a blank screen and thinking, now I will write. I mean, that's very intimidating, and it doesn't work for me, and I suspect it doesn't work for the majority of people.
No, and I think you just made a lot of people feel a lot better about that, because I think there's
I'm
this
glad.
idea, right?
I'm glad. I'm
Thank you.
glad.
Thank you for easing our minds a little. Judy, this has been so wonderful. We'll have to do a revisit another time because 20 minutes is clearly just too short. But thank you so much for being with us. Again, I hope everybody will buy a copy of Asylum. If you have not already, we'll make sure there's a link in the email that goes out after this. Also, just a reminder again that Judy will be doing a talk with the Vilna Shul on October 13th, as well as some other talks. So I hope you'll join in there to hear her speak more about the book. And I just want to
Laura,
say, Judy,
can I
yeah,
just add one
please.
thing?
Yeah, please.
You can go to my website to see a list of events, www.judyboltonfasman.com. And at the Vilna, I will be in conversation with Helen Fremont, who is an incredible memoirist, and I'm really honored to be paired with her in conversation. I think it's going to be a great program.
Absolutely. Many of us will be tuning in. I can guarantee that. So just to everyone out there, I just want to remind you all, thank you so much for being here. That JLive and other J-Arts programming like this does not happen without your generous support. So if you have enjoyed what you've heard today, please consider going online and making a gift right now to make future programs possible. And Judy, it is a delight to know you. And thank you so much for being with me this afternoon.
Thank you, Laura. It's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you. And Shana Tova to you.
Shana Tova and Shabbat Shalom. Talk to you soon.
Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.